Hello, everyone. I'm Joey Bright, and I have a guest today. I've been really excited about this because we've known each other for about 4 years. Her name is Shaista Justin. And I had a little influence on this film that she did, but we're going to be covering a lot of territory today. And welcome, Shaista. And I'd love you to tell us more about who you are and what are the various hats that you wear and why this would be why this would be of interest to the audience.
Yeah, so I've been a development producer in Hollywood for the last 14 years, and we're gonna get to what that means in some detail. But I also directed and produced a documentary last year called Altered Humans: How Biotech is Changing Who We Are. I'm an author. I wrote a book called Winter the Unwelcome Visitor, endorsed by Nobel Prize winner J.M. Coetzee. And I also have another book coming out called How I Almost Made It in Hollywood But Didn't: Half Truths and Misassertions about how to break into film and television and why you shouldn't.
Mm-hmm. That's provocative.
That's the idea.
Well, there we go. So, development producer, a lot of people don't know what that is. Can you just give a little more for that, even if we get into it deeper?
Yeah, a development producer you can think of. So another word for development producer has been creative producer in the past.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of like being the middleman between creatives or creators and broadcasters. So we're kind of like the unicorns of the industry. Not a lot of people know who we are, and there are very few of us. But we work with production companies and broadcasters. So for me, I'm an independent development producer. I used to work for a production company, and I went out on my own so that I could develop properties that I really felt reflected me and the creators that I like to work with. So it's basically, like say you have an idea and you're like, oh, I really would like Hollywood to make this film or this TV series. You would pitch someone like me, either at a production company or an independent development producer like me. And then I would look at the work and say, okay, well, here's what we need to do in order to get materials or a package together to take to a broadcaster. So I may work with agents, managers, celebrities, writers, authors, and talent. So actors even who may bring me something. And then, so I'm sort of, the one who'll look at it and say, all right, is this ready? And then if it's not ready, what do we need to do to get it ready? Do we need to attach a star to this? Do we need to attach a showrunner, a director? That's the packaging side, but also looking at the creative part. Is the screenplay ready? Is it developed enough? And so, and someone could come to me with a concept. Someone could come to me with a full screenplay. Someone could come to me with just a deck or a sizzle, like a reel of their show. And I'll assess all of that, how much work it'll take, and how much of a chance I think it has of getting greenlit, or in other words, getting financing. So that's been my primary role for the last 14 years.
You've got a number of things greenlit as well.
I have a number of things greenlit. I mean, Hollywood's a really funny place because you can get greenlit and then things can happen outside of your control that end that. I mean, I had a greenlit property just before the pandemic started, and we weren't, they said, 2 weeks to slow the spread, and that didn't happen. And sort of a lot of shows, including mine, got suspended. And so it's a really tricky business to get that financing and to see it through. There are people who've gotten to the first day of principal photography and had their shows canceled on the first day of shooting. So it's quite complicated. But yeah, I've had 21 plus shows options. I've had, an entire slate of mine optioned before. I've sold scripts. I've been hired to write scripts. So what I do is quite varied and complicated. And also, I think I'm one of the only, I actually know one other person who does this, development producer who works in the four silos of Hollywood, which is scripted, unscripted, film, feature films and documentaries. So I actually work in all of those areas. The things I don't do are kids and animation. Those are about the two things that I don't really do.
Mm. So how does all of that background get you to the creation of Altered Humans? What was how did it get started?
So I've always, I feel like if you look at the way my mind works, it's like an episode of Black Mirror. Like everything that I see in tech, I love sci-fi, I love tech. I've been following it for as long as I can remember. But where people see hope and promise for the future, I seem to be hardwired to see the negatives of the bad things that could happen. And so I'd been following, particularly at that point when you and I met, was biotech. And I was looking at some of the innovations in biotech and thinking, where is this all going? Now, I knew about transhumanism. Everybody sort of knows about transhumanism in a vague way. And my research led me to this philosophy that really is what is behind most of the technology that's developed, you know, from AI to biotech to medical science, even to the military and so on. So I was like, wow, there's an actual philosophy behind what gets funded and what doesn't get funded in these areas, in the area of tech.
This thing about medicine too, you come from a family, don't you, of a lot of medical?
I do, yeah. My mom is a nurse, and I have a number of aunts and uncles that are nurses. I grew up around medicine as well. So, you know, one of the first books I read was an anatomy book, you know, I'm like paging through and really fascinated. And I genuinely considered going to medical school instead of instead of grad school in English literature. And I actually have two medical publications, ironically. So I'm very keen on women's health in particular and how that affects us as women, because a lot of these technologies are geared towards women.
Mm.
But I'm not seeing, I feel like what's being promised to us, you know, longevity, reproduction, all of those things are falling way short of the mark. And in fact, a lot of these new developments are dangerous to our health. And I think ultimately quite dehumanizing to us as women and as humans.
Mm. We'll probably get into that some more. I was thinking about the time when you were beginning to film this, because I know we were having a lot of contact and you were getting interviews with different people, and you had picked my brain, and you know there were a couple of people I had suggested to you. What were there challenges at the time? Because I know that being here in San Francisco, I remember stuff just going up and down about whether it was mask mandates or travel mandates or any of that stuff. Did you have any challenges during the initial production? Because I remembered something about that.
Yeah. And for those of you who don't know, Joey's credited as associate producer on the film. And she was sort of first in when I had started with a concept and started to develop Altered Humans. And so, you know, definitely had an impact on the film and really enjoyed working with you. So at the time, yeah, I think like, you know, every production goes through their crises, and we were shooting during a time when mandates were still up at the end of 2022. And that posed a really unique problem because, you know, I'm unvaccinated. I have natural immunity. I had COVID right at the very beginning, and so did some others. And so we couldn't travel. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I could travel within the United States, but not outside of the United States. So I had to cancel some interviews that I had in Europe. Mm. And then I was able to remotely conduct an interview in Canada with Peter Bellany. And that was tricky, but very interesting. And I sort of did, like, we set up all these cameras so that there was someone, you know, at a DP there in person, but so that he and I could communicate even though I couldn't quite see what was happening with him and he couldn't quite see what was happening with me. So it was a tricky way to do an interview, and I think it went really well. I mean, Megan Murphy was able to come. She was able to fly from Mexico to San Francisco, so I was able to meet her there. That was great. But yeah, it was a big challenge, and I think also, during that period, there was a lot of paranoia with people in the industry, and one of my editors. So actually, I had one that just ghosted us. And then I hired an editor. And on the first day that he was supposed to work, he called me up like literally 2 minutes before he was supposed to start and said, I can't work with you. And I said, why is that? And he said, because of Megan Murphy. Megan Murphy's in the film. And I said, yeah, Megan Murphy's in the film. And he said, well, I feel like it would offend some people. And I said, well, I don't understand why, because what we're talking about is censorship. And I think it's Megan was heavily censored. She was kicked off of Twitter for talking about women being women and so on. And I also said to him, I said, I'm very open to talking to people that I may not politically agree with. I may not agree with their work or whatever. I don't have to agree with everyone that I talk to. And, everybody that I interviewed, I wouldn't say that we all have exactly the same values. But, that's what journalism is. That's what making documentaries is, I feel like there's this very strange culture, this cancel culture of, well, you and I don't agree, so we can't talk to each other, whether it's coming from the right or the left, right? Like, well, you don't think Trump is the greatest thing since sliced bread. We can't be friends. Or you don't think Biden is the greatest thing since sliced bread. And I personally am politically homeless. And I believe that in order to rebuild together as a society, we all have to talk to each other. It's really important. And I think as long as people are treating each other with dignity and respect, there really isn't a topic that we can't talk about. So for me, that was another bit of a surprise. And then as I continued to hire people on my film, I had to clear it with everybody. I was like, is there something politically I should know about that would give you a reason not to work on this production? And to me, this is also ironic because there haven't been a lot of jobs in Hollywood in the last few years, given all the strikes and the shutdowns and then the strikes and so on. So it was also just very interesting to me that people are so polarized that they can turn down a job. Certainly early in my career, I wasn't turning down any, I wasn't really turning down stuff. So so a different attitude has also emerged in media. And I think the world at large, where it's not just about doing your job. It's like, well, do you politically agree, or we can't work together? And I'm waiting for this to die out. I'm waiting for that to end because I think it's a shame.
I wondered if you were shooting that today in San Francisco and wanting to have this editor and Megan Murphy's there or whatever, even if she was like in his face, I wonder if he would turn it down now, after the strike and everything, right?
That's a good question. Has 2 years kind of, chilled him out? I don't know. Because I think that it's very obvious that social media platforms are censoring people. And, I even had a little notice from Facebook on one of my accounts saying, you can't monetize this account if you intend to talk about politics or vaccines. And in a way, I was grateful that they told me, because some of my posts would, I could get like 100 likes and it would go down to 0. And I was like, did anyone even see this post? And then I knew for a fact that Facebook was censoring that content because they told me. And they were like, well, basically, this is going to ding your account. So remove it and we'll let people see your other content. So there really isn't a lot of free speech. I think on Twitter, it's probably the freest place you can go, and Rumble right now that I can see. TikTok, I don't have a lot of experience with, but it does seem like people can say quite a few things. And you see content creators, saying, well, I can't say this word, so I'm going to say this word. And so people are finding their way around it, but it really does diminish the public square. And it really diminishes us as a society when we can't speak to each other unless it's in code.
Mm-hmm.
It's very fracturing.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like, there's this big push for diversity, but it's not diversity of thought.
Right. Right.
And to me, that's problematic, because if there is anywhere we want diversity, it's in thought.
Mm-hmm. What was the decision behind having the Epoch TV have this? You didn't choose the traditional Hollywood studio. Why was that?
Yeah, and I did have, which is quite a compliment, and I'm very flattered. I did have a couple of studios that were very interested in helping me with Altered Humans, or financing Altered Humans. And, I had to turn them down, because for me, I knew what would happen if I did a topic like this. I knew it would get watered down. I knew I wouldn't be able to say exactly what I wanted to say. And I think with Epoch TV, they gave me a lot of freedom. Obviously, you still have to submit the proposal, and they need to know what you're going to say. But they were very supportive of the direction my documentary took, and very open to the research that I was doing. And I think a lot of tech documentaries that try to criticize anything in the tech world, whether it's Silicon Valley or biotech, that they're kind of forced into the situation where they have to acknowledge what the positives are of these technologies. And I mean, I'm not making a 5-hour documentary to try to give a balanced view. I only had just over an hour. And so I really wanted the freedom to say what I wanted to say. And I think that this is where early in my career, all I cared about was getting deals. Right. And I think a lot of new creators are the same way. And they're like, I'll work with anyone. I'll work with any studio. I'll work with any production company. And I remember more experienced producers saying to me at that time, you really should think about where your show fits. And it doesn't matter if it's a comedy or sci-fi or whatever it is, but there really are, when you're choosing a broadcaster to work with or a production company, it really matters that you're in alignment with the broadcaster for what you want to say, because you may end up with a very different property than you had hoped to make. And and here's the tricky part, is they're financing it, it's their money. And so there really isn't that freedom necessarily to say what you want. But if you have a broadcaster that's in alignment with what you're trying to do, then you will kind of get that freedom. And it sounds like I'm saying, whether it's social media, whether you're a social media creator, whether you work in Hollywood, the people that pay for the platforms, the people that pay for the content, ultimately control the kind of content you want to make. So that partnership does matter. And I mean, I love, all the studios are great. They all do great work, and there are wonderful people there to work with. But in terms of what I wanted to say in particular, I felt like Epoch was the right place. And I still feel like that was the best decision I could make, because I'm very proud of this film. I think I did exactly what I set out to do. And that's really, as a creative, what you want. You want to be able to look at something and say, I'm proud of that. I said exactly what I wanted to say. That's what's important.
And in Altered Humans, you talk a lot about transhumanism and its influence on biotechnology, tech in general. What is transhumanism at this point?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, transhumanism is, everyone thinks it's a new idea, but it's not. We can trace its history to almost 2,000 years, at least. And it probably has a longer history than that. But transhumanism, the modern idea of transhumanism started with the ancient Gnostics, and who were opposed to Christianity, or saw Christianity differently. And so there are a lot of people who are interested in Gnostic texts right now and reading Gnostic texts. So they're like, Gnosticism, and why were the books of Gnosticism left out of the Bible, and so on. And there really is a fundamental reason for that. And that's because the ancient Gnostics believed that there were two powerful entities, let's say gods. There were two gods, not one. And the one God, who they consider evil, is the God that created nature and everything, and gave us these human bodies, and we're limited and we're going to die in 100 years and all of this stuff. The material reality as we know it, right? And then the other God, who some might say is satanic, quite frankly, said, well, I don't want that. I want you to be as gods yourself. I want you to have freedom of form. I want you to be able to choose what you look like, to augment your body, to live forever, to change your environment, the environment around you. And then that, morphed into a study of alchemy and the occult. And the more you go down this road of transhumanism, the more you realize, well, transhumanism isn't science. It's really a religion. And it's a religion that has alchemist, occult, and pagan roots. And if there were sort of, I like to think of transhumanism as in 6 different categories. Like, here are 6 things that transhumanists want. And the first thing that they want is longevity. So a lot of technologies you're seeing are about, well, how do we live forever? Right. So that's one of they're looking for the fountain of youth. Transhumanists want the fountain of youth. They want to live forever. They want freedom from form. So they want to be able to augment their bodies, whether that means becoming more animalistic, whether that means adding technology to their bodies to become like cyborgs, or uploading their consciousness to AI, etc. And another is reproduction. They want to control reproduction, which is, really the avenue of women. Reproduction is the avenue of women. And I find a really misogynistic streak in transhumanism. And you're going to find that most transhumanists are men. There are very few women who are transhumanists. And so they want to take reproduction away from women, actually. They want to control it entirely. And so, we're not even talking about, sure, right now it's IVF and it's this, but ultimately they want to be able to grow babies in vats and remove women from that equation. Because if you think about it, transhumanists want to be creators, right? So that means they want to be God. Well, who are creators in humanity? Women are the creators. We are more like gods than they are. And so they want to remove that from women so that they themselves can be creators. They also are interested in terraforming the planet. So as you see these like crazy big cities we've built and so on, in the 16th century in England, there was a movement against digging into the earth. They were very against mining because Mother Earth was seen as, female, and we shouldn't be plundering the body of Mother Earth. And so you see that there too. It's like, well, we want to build the structures that we want to build. We don't want to live in harmony with the natural world. We want to create a world that we want to see ourselves. And that includes the climate. Geoengineering is part of that as well. And then we have, the genetic engineering of plants and animals. And they're doing that right now. We have GMOs. Well, we're going to put fish genes into tomatoes, right? So that's a transgenic GMO. We're going to take DNA from here and we're going to put it over here. And then they want to merge with machines and create chimera. So for example, in 2020 in China, so everybody was so busy with the lockdowns that they weren't paying attention to the tech that was coming out. And I was keenly aware of it.
Mm.
And the Chinese said, yeah, we're going to make human pig chimera because they're technically not human. So we can harvest their organs and implant them in humans with absolutely no consideration of the ethical consequences of that, and asking the question of what is human and so on. And that's something that they're interested in doing a lot more of. And so really a lot of what they want to do is erase distinctions, right? Let's erase the distinction between male and female. Let's erase the distinction between human and animal, human and AI. Let's get rid of race. Mm-hmm. Let's get rid of age. Mm-hmm. So they really want people to lose all the things that make us human and remove all of those distinctions. And in their minds, which I will say in my mind is quite childish, but they believe that this is a way to bring equality. Like they genuinely are like, well, we'll be more equal when everyone can choose whether they're animal or human, or whether they're a cyborg, or whether they're a, a snake, alligator, flying monkey. Like they literally think, well, this will make us more equal if we can choose our form.
So I have a question here. This is very interesting, and I've never talked with you about this. This whole thing where we're starting to see like libs of TikTok, reporting on schools of kids where an entire classroom or something where you've got 3 or 4 boys and girls showing up in cat outfits and they want to bring a litter box. Is that part of, do you think, this erasure of boundaries that's happening in all kinds of ways? I mean, you used a different word. I just said boundaries. And yes, the distinction between real life animals and humans. Do you think these 13-year-olds or whatever are even grasping anything about transhumanism, or what do you think?
I don't think they understand where the philosophy comes from, but this is absolutely an effect of transhumanism, because it's the furry movement. Mm-hmm. And children, because very small children are exposed to this through cartoons and so on, are seeing imagery of humans merged with animals, which very much appeals to children, right? Obviously, because they cartoonize it, they Disneyfy it. And so, but this is a very transhumanist, the furry movement, and furries themselves may not realize this, but the furry movement is a transhumanist movement. It is a transhumanist goal to erase the distinction between human and animal. And that's why some small children are identifying as cats and dogs and going to school and demanding, or the teachers are demanding, that they defecate and urinate in litter boxes. I think this is really terrifying, because we as a society have never discussed the implications of doing this. Mm-hmm. These are just, they appear to be grassroots movements that have just emerged out of the blue, but they're not. And they're all connected, which is very interesting to me. And like, you look at CRISPR technology and biotech, right? And what was CRISPR created for? It was created to edit human genes. Well, why would you want to do that?
Why did Jennifer Doudna want to do that?
All transhumanists will say the same thing. This is for the good of humanity. So Jennifer Doudna would say things, who was co-credited with creating CRISPR, although there are like hundreds of claims of who created CRISPR. Nevertheless, so Jennifer Doudna would say, well, we want to make human beings healthier and better. Mm-hmm. So if you have sickle cell anemia, we can edit that out of your body. right? Or if you have a gene for cancer, we can edit that out of your body, and now you're going to be healthier and happier. Except, what happens when you're playing Jenga and you remove a block? Right? How many blocks can you remove? What are the negative consequences? No one is thinking about the negative consequences of what could happen if you turn genes on and off or you edit them out. Well, what are the long-term consequences of that? What are the short-term consequences of that? And people really aren't talking about it because they're so enamored. I think we've had it drummed into our heads for at least the last 100 years that all technology is good technology, that anything is new is advanced and therefore better than what came before it, without thinking of real life consequences of what could happen. And they're, literally, they're experimenting on people. And I genuinely feel like humanity we're just the earth is a giant laboratory, and humans are guinea pigs, and the transhumanists are the mad scientists in the lab testing things on people to see what will happen. And again, the public is so unaware that this agenda is ticking in the background, and that all the products that they're being offered are in some way connected to transhumanism, and they have absolutely no idea, because they're like, oh, you could cure my cancer or cure my sickle cell anemia. Isn't that wonderful? And that's how all these technologies move forward. This is a good for humanity. Thing is that, there are some technologies, I'm not trying to throw the baby out with the bathwater. There are some technologies that have helped people. There are some technologies that have saved lives, medical technologies in particular. But as a human good overall, is that what we're seeing? Remember, in the 1950s, they promised us a life of leisure. Robots will do this. Well, computers are great. Well, this computer program is great because you can do the work of a week's worth of work in one day. Well, what did they do then? They weren't like, hey, take 4 days off. You did all your work. They were like, we want you to do 5 weeks of work in one day. See, like that, even that is a very simple example. It never freed us. And now you have, AI in Hollywood and ChatGPT writing scripts and so on. All the fun, creative things that humanity wanted to be freed up to do is now being taken over by machines. Like, why are we making machines that make humans obsolete? It was supposed to be for this technocratic utopia where humans had more time to be human.
Well, with that, and the fact that with Altered Humans, you started pursuing, from what I understand, really getting into looking at the business that you were in of Hollywood. I'm always saying to people, there are thousands of people that can say that they work in Hollywood, and maybe they've never even been to Hollywood, especially since, we've gone online with so many things. But I'd love to find out from you what your start was in Hollywood, and maybe what you thought you were going to do. And now you've come to a place where you're writing a book that's for creators about how to break into Hollywood, but maybe not do it or something. It's like this thing. So I wanted to get towards your kind of leaving away the film. And thank you for going through all of that. We could spend a very long time talking about Altered Humans. It's just fantastic. I'm going to say that. But what was your first thought? And what are we talking when you first entered Hollywood? And what did you think? What were you expecting to do?
So, I actually started my career in professional theater at 17. I was an actress and co-writer of a production in Toronto. And so I worked with the company of sirens and sirens in schools. And so I was co-writing and performing with them. And then I started my undergraduate degree and continued to do work with them. So I really have a lot of history in theater. And I had produced another play, a professionally produced play, and so on. And then in 2019, I decided to enter the Toronto Fringe Festival. I got in. I did a play. I wrote and produced a play called Love and Human Extinction. It was one woman, two men, a love triangle at the end of the world. And it did really, really well. We got in the Toronto Star as a pre-festival must-see. My actress Jen Neal's got second best performer in the Fringe. I made a profit and paid everybody. And so it was this big success for a small theater show. And all these film and TV people had come to see it, to my incredible surprise. And, afterwards, you know how it is after a show, you go out for drinks and stuff. And they would come to me and say, Shasta, what are you doing in theater? You should be in film and television. You should make a film. And I was like, make a film? I don't know how to do that. That's, And I remember one of my actors came out to me. I'll never forgive him. And he said, oh, don't worry about it. It's easy. And I was like, easy? I love easy. By the way, I bought an easy button. Turn it. Easy. See, that was easy. I literally bought this because anytime I think a project's going to be easy, I make myself grab it and press it. It's easy. Because it's never easy. So what I did was I said, okay. And then he said, it might be better if we start off with a smaller film. So I made a shorter film, 44 minutes, not that short, called Swan Asleep. I found an investor. And I had all these incredible people in the city just volunteer to help me, industry professionals, which was wonderful. And so I made this film, and I started showing it around to other production companies and executive producers and producers. And I'd always get the same question, which is a classic question in Hollywood: what else do you have? And I was like, what else do I have? And so I started creating a slate of my own properties, of other projects that I thought would work really well. So that's how I got my start, was making a film that people thought was good, that they liked in the industry, and then being asked for other properties. And so I got my start that way, and it just grew and grew, and I became head of a production company. And then 8 years ago, I moved to LA and had a pretty great time here as well.
Why are you encouraging, maybe discouraging people about Hollywood is what it sounds like.
Yeah. Also, let me start from the beginning. So I got greenlit in my very first pitch to a broadcaster. And I was like, this is easy. That was easy. And I thought, that's it. This is going to be the rest of my life. It's so easy to get greenlit. I'm just going to keep doing this. And by the way, the network executive who greenlit my pitch 2 months later lost his job because the whole network was downsizing radically. Oh. So there went my film. But I still was like, oh, this is easy. And I think, first of all, I've been asked 1,000 questions over the last 14 years about how to break into Hollywood. Mm-hmm. And so many questions. And, I've given talks at film schools and the whole thing. And so I really just wanted to aggregate everything that I knew to help people, because I'm truly an outsider to Hollywood. I didn't even grow up in LA. Mm-hmm. And so, to be able to get meetings with the top executives at big studios is quite an extraordinary achievement. And I'm not patting myself on the back. It's like, wow, people were like, where did you come from? How did you get here? How are you in this party? How are you, talking to these people? Why do you have this network? And I think one of the frustrating, which was very lucky for me, and I feel incredibly lucky for my career. But what I was seeing was, I had this meeting. So I was talking to an executive in the industry, big studio. And I said, why is it so hard for a creator to be able to pitch a big studio? It doesn't have to be that hard.
Mm-hmm.
And the executive said to me, well, it's hard on purpose. That's part of the process, is we want it to be hard because we don't want every Tom, Dick, and Harry to come pitch us. So part of breaking into Hollywood is figuring out how the system of Hollywood even works.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that little bit of me that just kind of screamed internally was like, that's unfair, right? Because what it means is that people who grew up in LA, whose parents are in the industry or whatever, it's not an open playing field for creativity. That isn't very equal. And there are very good reasons for why there are levels you have to get through to be able to pitch these people, for obvious reasons, because a lot of people aren't ready to be able to pitch a big broadcaster. They don't know that, but they're not ready. Nevertheless, there are about 1,000 things that people don't know that can help them break in. And I thought, you know what? I need to write a book about this to help newbie creators through my own personal experiences, a lot of which are very funny, and through my own failures and successes, so that people can see exactly what it looks like if you are a creator trying to break into Hollywood. So this book is not really for actors. I mean, I think like actors, directors, anybody would really benefit from it. Anyone who wants to be in Hollywood at any level would benefit from my book. But I wrote it specifically for creators, people who come up with an idea, a script, shoot a sizzle, who want to get greenlit and get their property made. So I'm kind of my book kind of removes all those barriers so that people know exactly what they should do and the situations they're going to find themselves in. A lot of people don't even know how to pitch in a room or how to get the meetings. They might have the properties, but they don't know how to get the meetings. So it addresses all of those things. And then I said, well, why shouldn't you try to break into Hollywood? So for those people who want to break into Hollywood, this is your book. This is exactly what you need, and it's going to help you. However, as people are reading the book, I'm hoping that they'll also think about, wow, this is hard. This is a lot of work. Do I really want to do that? Mm-hmm. And so, because I very much support independent creators, and the one thing that social media and the internet has done is to create massive amounts of content and incredible creatives that may not make it in Hollywood, mm-hmm. but there's a different avenue that they can pursue. There's this guy who has videos where all he does, he's on Instagram, he's on YouTube, clean up people's yards. That's it. That's all he does. And it's not a TV show. If he said, hey, you're a development producer, I'm going to pitch you. How about a show where I clean up people's yards? I'd be like, dude, that's not a TV show, right? But he's got millions of followers all over social media who love it. I love it. I watch it. I watch him clean up a messy yard. And I'm like, that's amazing. But is that content that belongs in Hollywood? No. There's another dude who just jumps rope. That's all he does, like 30 to 60 second videos of him, like cool song, jumping rope. There you go. It's so entertaining to watch. But is that a TV show? Is that a film? Is it a document? It's not. It's none of those things. So I feel like there are a lot of wonderful creatives and creators. Their work doesn't belong in Hollywood. But that doesn't mean that they can't be creators. That doesn't mean they can't have a following. That doesn't mean they can't monetize what they're doing. So part of it is also figuring that out. Now, if you want to make TV shows, Hollywood kind of is the only place you can go. I mean, you can do your own little web series and so on, which is fine. And some people do really well with that. But if you want to make a Battlestar Galactica or a Fallout or Game of Thrones, those are massive budgets. Mm-hmm. So if you are someone with a big world property, you really do have to go to Hollywood. Mm-hmm. So I think it's helping creators figure out, what kind of creator am I? If you are a TV series creator, chances are you're going to have to go to Hollywood. Mm-hmm. Or a big film, because then there's the independent film side as well. Then you're going to need a big studio. You're going to need big financing. Mm-hmm. But maybe you're the kind of creator who gets together with a few friends and can, make a little funny clip about something. And people on the internet love it. And that's great too. Right. So I think, but also like, I love the idea of people doing this for themselves. I can't help but want that. I love working in these big teams. I like making big world stuff. I love being pitched big world stuff. But it's really hard for that to happen in Hollywood, to get greenlit. Whereas you can greenlight yourself and put up 5,000 videos on YouTube and see if you have an audience, mm-hmm. And there's something very forgiving in a way for creators about using social media in that way. Because if you have, a bad reel that's like 60 seconds, you can just delete it, try again tomorrow. Mm-hmm. Eventually you'll find your rhythm and your format and your audience. And I love that idea. I'm very in love with that idea. But big world shows require Hollywood. So it really just depends.
So this book sounds like it's really geared for creative minds to be able to get to that place and decide, yeah, I think you're better going to be aimed at what it is that your goal is, whatever the project is you might have. You might decide that's more for entertainment. I'll put it on YouTube. I'm not going to have this as a career probably. But it sounds like it gives one a very good, realistic perspective. Yes, it might be a letdown, like, oh, I thought I could do that. Or now I see what's required and I'm really going to be able to package this now, because practically everything that you told me in the beginning of this conversation was about people pitching stuff to each other. I mean, you end up with a huge package that's all together that you then still have to pitch, correct? Mm-hmm. So everybody's constantly like, oh, I got this great idea. There's this, woman that's playing baseball and she's wearing pajamas. And it's like, okay, where? And then you start thinking categories and how does that? And who are the audiences? And there are so many decisions that are involved in all that. And
and I think that's why development producers are so rare. And I talk about it in the book because there are about 14 different kinds of producers, but development producers are the rarest. And that's the thing, is that you have to calculate, like, for example, there are TV series where I would be like, okay, you need at least 3 showrunner, famous talent, another famous talent, whatever. 3 is good enough. And then there are things where, you're going to need the budget and this and that. There's a lot of detail. And the first draft of my book was 200 pages. The second draft of my book was 400 pages. I added so much detail for people so that really, if you're a newbie, if you're an Uber driver or an airline pilot, and you know nothing at all about Hollywood, you can buy this book and know I define all the terms that we use. Because one of the biggest tells that you don't understand Hollywood is you don't know the terminology that's being used. And it's important that you know it, because they immediately clock you. Like if you say, well, what materials do you have? And they say, I have a Bible. And then you're like, okay, I know you're not from Hollywood, right? That kind of thing. Like, I know you're not a native. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying it's not going to stop them, but they will definitely clock you as someone who's not in the industry. And that's something you don't want. So in many ways, there were a lot of social protocols in the book. How to interact with people, like when to email someone, how often to email them, even simple things like that. So I really packed it full of detailed advice, so that literally, if as long as you can read at the reading level of my book, you can understand how to break in.
Mhm.
And then if you read it and you're like, you know what, I'm going to try my hand at being an independent creator, great. If you're like, oh, fantastic, I now have the tool that I need to use to get into Hollywood, fantastic. I
Mhm.
support both avenues.
Mhm.
But I definitely have a soft spot in my heart for independent creators.
Mm. This comes to sort of a last issue that I wanted to cover, and that is, we just had that strike. I know that that's not your heavy strength, and there are a lot of issues involved with why Hollywood had a strike, but there are a lot of negative things coming out about Hollywood. My own sort of following of what's showing up in the movie theaters and what's showing up on television and all the massive number of platforms that we have to choose from and everything. I hear on the outside people that don't follow film the way I do, and they go, I don't go to the movies anymore. They don't have anything good. And I'm like, there were so many horrible movies last year. And I said, I saw so many fantastic films. Most of the
Mm-hmm.
films I saw were foreign. They were at theaters here. We number of theaters have shut down in the Bay Area since, the lockdown. But what is this rumor that seems to be going around that Hollywood is imploding? And I'm not sure, because I'm somebody who, no matter what I say about stay human, for me, part of staying human is supporting cinema. It's an art form that I feel is super important. I take it you're not acting anymore, huh?
No,
You haven't been doing that for a long time.
no. I got offered, actually, I've been offered my own show more than once, which is there's some very funny stories about that I'll tell you some other time. But no, I don't. I'm not a performer anymore.
Do you
Um,
include, I know you do have a lot of funny stories. Have you included a lot of weird anecdotes and
Oh,
funny
all the
stories?
weirdest anecdotes are in
Oh,
there. I
good.
mean, there's one where I gave up meeting the former president of a country to meet with a showrunner instead. Hilarious. So I know, I was like, former president of a country and showrunner. Oh my gosh. And they were exactly at the same time. It's a really wacky story. But yeah, I mean, I've met with A-listers. I've got crazy stories. I don't name names in my book. For
Mhm.
anyone who's thinking I'm gonna name names, I don't name names in my book, but I do tell you, I mean, the best stories I can't tell you. I can't tell the public, of course. But there's plenty in there to keep people entertained and amused. Now, what's happening in Hollywood right now? So that's a very complicated question, with such an enormous number of factors. But one of the things that I would say is that Hollywood's going through a bit of a drought right now. And so what happened, the lockdowns impacted Hollywood enormously. I heard a statistic that 100,000 industry professionals actually left California because of the lockdowns, because they weren't able to work and afford it. And then we've been hit with strike after strike and so on. So there's definitely been, a lot of external and internal forces in Hollywood that have impacted, the bottom line, the kind of content that's been created, the kinds of people that are able to break in, the kinds of people that had to leave. So I feel like it would take a few hours to talk about it. Some of it is about new technologies, the emergence of AI, the emergence of programs. We could get into deep fake technology, technology where they want to, like that whole thing that just happened with Scarlett Johansson, where she was offered to be the voice of an AI and she said no. And it looks like they copied it anyway.
I didn't know anything about this Scarlett Johansson, because you started to say that immediately. I think of the film Her and the fact that she played an AI voice. So it seems like that's why they, maybe whoever it was, wanted her, because this ironic, connection to that.
Oh, absolutely. And all the articles that talk about it always mention that. but actors are, fighting around their digital image, their ownership of their digital image. So that's something for actors who are famous have different issues around it, but the actors who are trying to break into the industry, they're being asked to sell their digital image to, production companies and so on, right at the very beginning, which is a very dangerous thing, because then their performances, of course, can be copied for other films and so on. So there are a lot of issues with, AI. There's Unreal Engine. There are a lot of programs, animated programs and so on, that are able to replicate real life. It's like people are making even little short films using AI that are blowing my mind, and that terrify me, because there are no human hands on these properties. And yet these kinds of AI couldn't exist without, 100,000 years of human creativity. And that bothers me immensely, because why are we allowing this to happen? Why do we want our content and entertainment created by computers that are not creating something new, by the way? Mm-hmm. They're stealing from all the creators that were there before. Mm-hmm. And this is, it's a big box of worms, this particular one, because you have all technology is good, people. We just have to adjust ourselves, and it's going to be fine and great. And, I'll just become an AI prompter. Right. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's not artistry. Mm-hmm. That's not creativity. I mean, it's creative in a small way. I'm going to get AI to do what I want it to do. Okay, fine. But that's not drawing, painting, writing. I've said before on my Twitter, I said, we're going to have, the next generation is going to be completely illiterate.
Yeah.
Because if you're going to use ChatGPT to write your emails, to write your scripts, to write your books, well, then you're going to be read only. There won't be writers. Mm-hmm. And becoming a writer is one of the hardest things to do in the creative arts, because you typically, most writers, novelists at least, or authors, don't have a first book out till they're 30. And that's because it's so difficult to learn the art of writing well. And on top of it, to have something interesting to say, and so it's a lifetime skill, and writers don't go out of style. Like, you can be publishing books till you die. I mean, look at George R. Martin. He's still going. And so because it takes a lifetime to master a skill like that. Mm-hmm. And then if you're just putting a couple of prompts into AI, and it's please write me a Game of Thrones type, whatever, in the vein of George R. R. Martin. And here's some prompts, and then it spits it out. Well, you didn't write that. You didn't do anything. AI stole from George R. R. Martin.
Has anything that you know of now, if I turned on the TV to either HBO Max, Showtime, Hulu, anything, is there a show that has happened, even an episode, comedy show, anything that you know of, that they said this entire thing was just prompted by a human, but it's all been written in AI as scripts?
I mean, not that I know of personally, but that doesn't mean that it either hasn't happened or will happen. I know a guy, not personally on the internet, who literally, I write decks for people from scratch. It's I develop them and I write them and create them and so on. And he was like, "Oh, I just get AI to create decks and then I sell them to producers." Now, I don't know if those producers and directors know that it's all ChatGPT, but it's incredibly insulting to someone like me.
Mm-hmm. And a deck, Shaista, what is that again?
Okay, so in television specifically, if you're pitching a series, whether it's scripted or unscripted, has to be in sort of deck form. So you're looking at 5 to 7 pages that outline your show.
Mm-hmm.
It's like an overview, but with a fair amount of detail. They're very difficult to write. They are an art form in and of themselves. People are extremely secretive about them, because that's intellectual property right there. So then when you're pumping it into Chat GPT, here's the thing for me as a producer, if someone is writing me a deck in Chat GPT, first of all, they didn't write it. Secondly, well, now everyone else has access to it because it just integrated into everything else that's ever been written. That's very dangerous. So then, even if you write a novel with Chat GPT, well, everybody else has access to it now too. And then who has ownership of it?
Correct. That's a thing of the boundaries. And you had talked about, I had said that earlier. You were saying distinctions, and it's the whole thing of, it reminds me of Klaus Schwab. You will own nothing and you will be happy. And that means what used to be intellectual property, as well as that we're all like on some big mind meld thing or something, whether it's about sexuality, whether it's about age, as you said, race, whatever. It's just this like blob of
so they call
recognition for uniqueness.
I love that. No recognition for uniqueness. You're right. And they call this the biodigital convergence. So the internet of bodies, the internet of things, where our bodies, now we're cyborgs, we're connected to AI, to the internet, to everything. And we're all just one big mind meld. We're the Borg. Remember Star Trek and the Borg? So the transhumanists are moving towards this hive mind experience of being human, that there are no secrets from each other. All thought is the same. This uniformity. Their answer to inequality is uniformity. How ridiculous is that? What an ugly, ugly world. I like difference. I like that people are not the same. I like that people have different cultures. I love that people look different, that your eye color could be different, your hair color could be different. I like going to different parts of the world and seeing different architecture. I mean, I think the beauty of humanity is in our diversity. I don't think it's in our sameness. And again, I come back to this idea. It's a child's idea. I want everything to be the same. Oh, you're prettier than that one. Okay, well then you have to wear a paper bag over your head. So everyone's a 5. We can't have 10s and 2s. All of humanity has to be a 5. And I think about A Brave New World, which I reread recently, and everyone should, because I bet you all read it in high school. Now's a good time to revisit in 1984. And what's in A Brave New World? Well, clones. They have, like types of clones. So they have like 15,000 of the same person. And then they have 4 levels, 4 classes of humans. And then within that, there's just thousands of clones. So this is what they're moving towards. And it's, like I think of as a mom, I'm like, you get what you get and you don't get upset. And the transhumanists are like, no, we're upset. If Susie had 3 chocolate chips in her half of the cookie, I want 3 too. Why did I only get 1? And it's this constant push against material reality. Well, I'm a man and I can't have babies. Therefore I want to have babies. I'm like, why? Right? Like it's a refusal to accept reality. Trees grow in a certain way. Well, I want that one tree to bear 25 kinds of fruit instead of accepting the fact that it's a goddamn pine tree and you're not getting apples from a pine tree, right? So it's a childish mindset to refuse to accept reality as it is. Material reality is real. I'm sorry. I don't care how many philosophy classes you take. I don't care how many times you tell me gravity isn't real. Anyone who tries to tell me gravity is not real, I'm like, great. You know what? Why don't I stand on top of a 20-story building? You stand at the bottom and I'll drop an anvil on your head. Let's see if gravity is real. No one's taken me up on that test yet. But it's I don't know. It's like an infection. It's like a disease, these ideas
Mm-hmm.
that are just permeating everything. And most people are not even aware that it's happening. They're just like, I think I should be as a god. The god is within me. I'm like, no, it's not. Okay, you're not a fucking god. You live, you die. If you're lucky, you get this many years in between. You're human, you're fallible, you make mistakes. Let's not forget the Greek gods envied us. Why did they envy us? Because we were human, because we made mistakes, because we don't live forever, because we're like a theater show. It's only there while it's there. It's the experience of life itself.
And just like Woodstock, if you weren't there, you weren't there and you missed it, and that's it. Shaista, do you have any ideas that you would be working on something involved again with the same themes that exist in Altered Humans? Is there anything else that you thought about working on? Because things I know are moving really fast. I watch your Instagram. Now you've got, with your Facebook page and what you're doing on Twitter, and it's like you're on the cutting edge of so many understanding or at least seeing. I know that sometimes you write and you say, I'm not fully aware of what this thing is capable of, but I'm wondering about it. I see all this stuff. So yeah, do you have any ideas about doing something?
Actually, in the process of launching, or at least in pre-production, with two different podcasts. And I don't want to tell you the titles yet because I'd like them to be out and then the title comes with them. But if you follow me on social media, you'll get updates. But I'm literally starting to interview people for two podcasts. And one of them will be all about transhumanism. And the other one is going to be all about film and television, creatives, creation, and basically expanding on whatever I couldn't cover in my book. Because as I finished that book, I was like, oh my gosh, there's this stuff that I left out, and I really feel like I need to write another one. And I think the second book for me is really going to be, the first book was like sort of for beginners, but the second book is also really going to address like the artist and creativity itself. Mm-hmm. And it's really for artists, not just how to break in, but for artists and how to navigate so many of these things, and writer's block and inspiration, all of that stuff. So I'm really excited about working on that. But two podcasts is what I'm trying to do. And it's interesting because you have so adeptly maneuvered us from biotech to film and television throughout this interview, which is very well done of you. But it's these two worlds. It's like those are my two major worlds right now. That I love them both, and it's not often that they come together. Mm-hmm. So it's a lot of work, but I'm having fun, and I'm meeting amazing, interesting, fascinating people that I hope to bring their ideas forward and really try to get the public interested in biotechnology and transhumanism, because I know they sound like really scary words, but I want to demystify them, and I want people to really understand what they are and to think about the negative impacts of these new technologies, the philosophy of these new technologies, but not to be afraid of them, and to start that public conversation around these issues so that we just don't run into a billionaire technocratic future, because that's what they want. They know what they want, but does the public know yet? Mm-hmm. So I'm hoping to help people make that decision for themselves.
Final question. How many pages did your book end up being?
Girl, it's like 430 now. I'm scared. I'm doing a copy edit, which is supposed to be the last edit. And I'm really scared that I'm going to end up adding more. I need to stop getting more ideas to put in the book, which is why it's good I have my social media, because then I can put put
We
all the
have any
extra stuff
ETA
there.
to look forward to though, like into summer or fall, or what's going on?
I would say the next 6 weeks.
Wow, that's
It'll
a
be
lot
available.
faster than I thought. And it's going to be an Amazon thing. I'll get the link from you and everything. I'll put all your stuff. I want to encourage
Thank
everybody to
you.
check out your Instagram, which is just your name. And same thing with Facebook, and you're the same on Twitter, where you fascinating stuff. And your exchanges with other people in this arena is always really interesting too when that gets going. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for this. It's very unusual, and I dig it. But I think that the headspace that you have as a development producer, it's one of those things I think maybe I could have done at some point. I was always thinking I should have been doing continuity, pointing out the this and that. But there are very few people I can understand now, and thank you for laying that all out. I think there aren't that many people that have so many different things in mind and can keep track. It's really a thing. And I've noticed that there's just certain people that do that. And you're obviously one of them, and you've got a whole lot going on. So
Well,
thanks for
thank you,
spending
Jerry.
this time. It's lovely.
Stay tuned for the Altered Humans trailer.
Medicine has moved from making us well to making us better than well.
Bigger, faster, stronger, smarter, to even make human beings, in a sense, superhuman.
The big product of the 21st century are going to be bodies and minds.
This new gene editing technology known as CRISPR is to genetics and genetic technologies what the atomic bomb was to physics.
It's like doing surgery with an axe.
We're taking genetically modified organisms and we're injecting them in little kids' arms. We just shoot them right into the vein.
It's experimental for a reason. If you want to be a lab rat, go for it. I was.
It is the biggest scam of all time, and we're living in it.